Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to get started. We're going to give it a few minutes for everyone to join, and then I will pass it over to your host today, MJ and Ben. So thank you guys again for being here. All right, everyone, we're just going to give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Thank you again for being here today. We're really excited to talk with you guys about the future of cannabis retail, the emerging technologies and trends. All right, and just a quick reminder, the webinar today will be recorded. So everyone who registered and is attending today will get that emailed to them following the event. All right, I think we're ready to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it along to MJ and Ben.
Thank you very much, Haley. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Hello, my name is MJ. I'm the Senior Director of Sales and Partnerships over at Sweed. I'm incredibly excited to dive into the future of cannabis retail today with you. Just for those that don't know, Sweed is a next generation cannabis retail technology platform. One of the biggest challenges that we see in the technology industry right now is a fractured retail stack, right? Running a successful dispensary really requires a point of sale system. You need an e-commerce page, loyalty page, payments, delivery if you guys are doing a delivery state, and much more. And too often, these solutions are really just kind of disconnected, whether it's through poor integrations and multiple vendors. That's often leading to inefficiencies. It's leading to compliance risks and poor customer experience. So Sweep solves that by bringing everything together under one single platform, allowing retailers to streamline the operations and focus on growth. While we won't be doing as much as I want to, a product pitch today, many of the challenges and innovations that we'll cover that we're going to cover, excuse me, are going to tie directly into the work that we're doing every day for customers across the country. And I'm very excited today to be joined by Ben. Ben is the leading corporate development at Leaf Trade. If you're not familiar with Leaf Trade, Leaf Trade is a leading wholesale platform for the cannabis industry, helping brands and retailers optimize the supply chain and purchasing strategies. Ben, you and I go back several years now, and while I'm stoked that our story has really kind of come full circle here, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and LeafLink for those that are unfamiliar with your work, and then we can kick this thing off.
Thanks, MJ. I really appreciate you having us. Good morning, everyone. It's awesome to meet you. We're going to have so much fun today. I manage mergers and acquisitions and industry research for LeafLink, so it's really my job to know what's happening in the market and how those trends impact your businesses and what it's going to do to cannabis over the next decade. LeafLink is the wholesale platform for cannabis. Every week, we help over 3,000 brands sell their product to more than 8,000 retailers across more than 30 states. We recently acquired the Leaf Trade platform that had been a part of Swede late last year. And now together across Leaf Trade platform and Leaf Link platform, we do more than $9 billion of volume in the wholesale market on an annual basis. The vast majority of products sold at dispensaries come from our platforms. And our priority really is to make the commerce process easier for you as a retailer, make it more efficient with less headaches, more simple workflows, and overall reducing the operational burden. We want to make your purchasing decisions easier to make and inform you with the data and strategies to do that in the most effective way possible. So really happy to be here. I know this is going to be a really valuable time.
Yeah, likewise. I'm stoked to have your insights on this conversation. I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing where we go today. Just a few like housekeeping things as we kind of look over our table of contact or index of what we're going to be covering today. Today's discussion is really going to be forward thinking and practical. We're going to take a look at what's kind of happening in the market right now, some of the technologies that are really shaping that next wave of retail and how business can stay competitive within this rapidly changing landscape. We'll take a look at some of like the big picture where the cannabis industry currently stands today, some key growth trends, regulatory shifts, what's kind of making an impact, on dispensary success in 2025. We'll cover some of the emerging technologies, whether it's AI-powered automation, omni-channel solutions. We'll dive into some of that and how that's kind of changing the game for some of these dispensaries. And as customers, right? They're really driving this industry and their expectations, at least from where I sit, that's really kind of changing quickly. So we'll talk about the importance, I think, of some of the loyalty programs, the personalized shopping experiences that you can roll out, and really how retailers are best adapting to really kind of just meet that demand. And then let's be real, right? We got to talk about challenges and opportunities here. Running a cannabis operation in this space, it is not easy business. There are a lot of different hurdles that operators need to like step to, figure out. And so we'll kind of cover that today, whether it's, some of the compliance headaches, the scalability, and kind of discuss, the opportunities that come from there. And then we'll also kind of just look ahead, right? What's going to be the next 5, 10 years of cannabis? We're kind of explore some of those transformative shifts in cannabis retail. But throughout the webinar, I want to remind everybody too, please feel free to drop questions into the chat. We'll certainly try to leave some time for Q&A at the end. We'll maybe address some of those as we kind of go through as well too. So let's dive in. All right, cool, Ben. Look, I love the cannabis industry, man. Like I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, when else do you have an opportunity really to kind of build this industry from scratch? That doesn't kind of come around like, that often. So I'm proud of the work that we're doing in this space. And while I'm fully, aware of the incredible growth, when I'm looking at these slides that are looking at some of these market growths, these numbers are just a crazy reminder that the cannabis industry isn't just expanding, but it's evolving at a pace that's going to demand much more scalable operations, right? Like, look, in 2022, the market was valued at 30 billion. And we're looking at almost 2020, that's around 60 billion. That kind of growth is going to present a lot of challenges. And I know like when I'm looking at this, right, from where I sit here at Swede, right, I see a lot of like the growing rise in dispensaries year over year. And I immediately think that more dispensaries equals more competition, right? With new markets coming online, existing ones maturing, operators need to start thinking just beyond opening up their doors. I think the winning success for operators is going to be those that are willing to kind of optimize their operations, streamline compliance, and kind of create more of a tailored customer experience. It's to the point now where, technology is no longer optional, right? As the market scales, retailers are going to face a lot of growing pains, right? Whether it's disconnected or poorly integrated, systems and integrations, inefficiencies, difficulty maintaining across multiple locations and even states. I'm kind of curious, Ben, as we look through some of these explosive growth numbers, for the potential in cannabis, it's obviously undeniable, right? But with that growth comes increased competition. How are you seeing these trends unfold from the wholesale side of things? And what is your take on the operators need to kind of adjust and stay ahead of the curve?
That's a great question, MJ. Everything in cannabis happens at the state level, and we know that really well. But probably more than any other industry in the world, the sum of the parts matter in how this industry is going to grow going forward. Over the last year, most sentiment in the industry has been relatively negative on price compression, license removals, oftentimes operators unable to plant. And that happens a lot from some of your more mature legacy markets that have comprised a lot of sales growth over the last decade. But as we look to the future of this industry, there's really these strong emerging green shoots that are coming from the states earlier on in the maturity curve and really ready to drive expansion for our industry. Despite all the negativity, like national sales in the industry are at all-time highs. Supply imbalances have largely right-sized, improving profitability in many of those challenged markets. And license interest is accelerating in many of these expanding states. And that's where I want to focus a lot of our conversation on. Where are the states where retail is growing the most, and how is that impacting the dynamics that the general retail mix across the country is facing. Because over the next 2 to 3 years, there's really 6 states that are comprising all growth. It's New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Ohio, Illinois, and Minnesota. And across those 6 states, they're going to issue nearly 5,000 retail licenses. That's more retail license issuance than at any point over the last few years. It's going to roughly increase the total number of dispensaries in the country by 70%, excluding Oklahoma. It's a really big deal, right? You have states like New York ready to bring on 1,500 licenses, New Jersey bringing on 800 retail licenses, Ohio issuing another 350 retail licenses to their existing supply chain, Maryland issuing over 1,000 social equity licenses, more than 300 of those at retail, Illinois with 250, Minnesota with 600 plus. Like, these are really big numbers that are contributing significant sales growth to our industry. And as operators in each of those markets, like, the considerations for how the states are going to change over time are really important. Because today, in all of those markets with bulk pricing at like $2,500 to $3,000 a pound, keys of distillate selling for $8,000 to $10,000 a liter, supply and demand dynamics that are really good. Like, the lessons that we've learned from many other states is that over time, as traditional agricultural forces impact on the supply side, with low marginal costs increasing total supply in the markets, and retailers trying to come on as fast as possible. Like, you as a retailer have a large assortment of brands that continue to come on to adequately stock your inventory. At the same time as wholesale operators in these markets, pricing is probably going to go down over time. You have to make sure that your cost structure is adequately represented for where prices are going to be a year or two or now. And we have analogs across many states to know that, like, the $3,000 bulk pricing is going to look a lot closer to $1,000 a pound 2 3 years from now in all of those markets. So as a wholesale operator, you have to be ready for what's to come over the next few years, and a lot of the techniques and strategies that we'll talk about, key tactics to take as an operator in markets, especially with price compression dynamics, is going to be really important. So I'm excited for us to think about what key technologies you can use to address those challenges as they come. But really, like, times are stronger now than ever, and despite some of the negativity and the press on the industry, like, things are really good in some of these growth markets, and in some of the more consolidating challenge markets, things are going to get better over time.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're starting to see some of that structure kind of lay out across those states, right? Where Michigan, some of these prices are starting to drop. I'm in Illinois. We don't see that too much, but we're even starting to see some traffic going across state lines and going to Michigan because of those, price constraints as well, too. Very cool. And speaking about challenges, let's kind of move on to that next slide, right? And, I think as this industry grows, right, operators are going to continue to face new challenges. Some are already familiar that, we're identifying, and Ben even kind of highlighted some of there as well, too. Some will be involving. And with those challenges, there does come some opportunities with that, right? So when we're looking at like regulatory hurdles, no operator is a stranger to compliance headaches, right? I mean, regulators are constantly changing and trying to keep up, especially if they're going across multiple locations or even state lines. It's really a full-time job, and quite often it's probably the full-time job of multiple people across the organization that are kind of like dialing in on that. And that's where I think, like using a technology like Sweed and really having like an intelligent tech stack kind of makes all the difference, in my opinion. What we do here is we're kind of trying to automate the compliance at that point of sale. We're going to ensure some of that real-time tracking and making sure that it's seamless reporting without any of those manual workflows, whether it's some purchase limits or track and trace reporting or audit readiness. Our platform is really kind of designed to keep operators compliant without really having to slow them down. And because we have a centralized system, right, our POS, our e-com, our delivery, our marketing, operators now don't have to juggle those multiple systems, and they may not have to worry about like if something goes wrong, who they have to point fingers to get that fixed, right? Compliance is really kind of baked into the workflow, and it's not an afterthought. And with that also comes as it grows, data and privacy and security really becomes like an issue as well too. I think, more dispensaries are adopting technology. Security is becoming, a bigger issue and concern. You got customer data, transaction records, inventory reporting that holds sensitive information in there. And I think that's why being, SOC 1, SOC 2 type compliant in cannabis really, really matters. These audits are going to ensure that everyone's meeting the specific security and financial reporting standards, and just kind of alleviate that headache that you have, worrying about that back end of your business. And obviously there's no shortage of, new technologies that are currently emerging. almost on a daily basis, I'm constantly getting approached by people asking, to check out a new piece of tech, whether it's, some new integration or, AI or automation or a widget. It's all kind of designed really to kind of just enhance that customer experience and those transactions. But the challenge is, I think, is really kind of just choosing the right tools without complicating that customer experience. And that could be tricky. I'm curious, Ben, though, like, what does LeafLink see as those key challenges for retailers today, and how do they capitalize on some of those opportunities for improvement?
By far, the number one pain point for our industry and the largest cost impacting cannabis is poor inventory management. Retailers and brands lose over $10 billion of cash flow a year because they're managing their inventory impractically. And we think about that a lot at LeafLink. It's really the core nexus of our product strategy and what we're trying to address as a company. And there's really two key areas where retailers are facing a lot of challenges. The first is overstocking. On LeafLink's platform, the average dispensary has day sales inventory of 100 to 120 days. Your traditional C-store or grocery store is closer to 20 or 30 days. All of that extra inventory that you have sitting on your shelves is extremely expensive as a retailer. The average store does about 3.5 million in sales. That means you have an extra 800K in working capital tied up in your inventory across all the stores in the country. That's nearly $10 billion of working capital requirements. But to liquidate all of that cash need, you have to sell product at discounts. The average product in a dispensary on LeafLink's platform sells for a 13% discount. That's on average across products that are discounted or not. That's insane. On a $32 billion industry, that's over $4 billion of pure cash profit loss. The other stockouts, a lot of stores don't actually carry enough inventory of the SKUs that move very quickly. And it means that high consuming purchasers don't actually go and purchase at the store because they don't have the brand that they're looking for. On LeafLink's platform, we see about 6% of lost retail sales to stockouts. So between excess inventory causing discounting and too little inventory of items people want, retailers are losing about $6 billion of total costs. Brands upstream are losing about $3 billion of cost. Like, just to give you an idea of how big of a cost that is, changing 280E probably adds $2 to $3 billion in cash flows to the industry. Descheduling a bit more, like total investment into the industry over the last 3 years is less than the amount lost inventory management in 1 year in this industry. So at LeafLink, we're thinking a lot about how our product strategy is impacting the inventory management decisions of our retailers, and many of our products across our sell-through insights, many of our market data products, some of our inventory and buyers club products are helping retailers better manage their inventory so they don't have to suffer from a lot of the costs of overstocking and stockouts. It is so important.
Yeah, we have that conversation with retailers all the time, like even within the reporting structure that's built into our platform, right? How do we look forward in terms of, stocking in a more sophisticated way so we don't have to have all that waste? So yeah, good call on that, Ben. All right, great. So when we're looking at the next slide here, the emerging technologies that are kind of shaping cannabis retail, right? We kind of talked on this a little bit earlier in that first slide, right? Cannabis is really kind of just evolving quick. What once used to be more cash, heavy, manually operated, and I still have people that are, doing, scribbling down all their inventory or using Excel sheets, and they're not connected to a system. But that connected retail environment that's starting to leverage AI is really starting to be more important now, more than ever before. And we're starting to see some consolidation, right? So over the next couple of slides, we're going to kind of break down some of the new innovation and how they're kind of shaping that future of cannabis retail and kind of what's next for the industry. So let's take a look at e-commerce innovations, right? I love talking e-commerce. I think e-commerce really kind of serves as the face of your business. I think e-commerce in cannabis retail has really evolved just outside of just an online menu, and I think you kind of, I still see people that are, some operators that are holding strong and they're still printing out their daily product discounts and they're putting it next to the bud tender. And that's cool, man. That's a vibe. I get that. But I think the most successful operators are those that are going to kind of be leveraging technology to create more of that seamless, intelligent, and compliant digital shopping experience. And some of that starts with AI, right? AI is going to be able to provide you with, personalized, let's maybe back up. personalization is the new standard in online retail, right? And I think you're just seeing this in retail and traditional industry as well too. Everywhere that you go, all the websites, even in your Amazon feed, everything now is really highly curated, and it's really personalized. And I don't think cannabis is any different than that. I think, using AI-driven product recommendations is really going to help help operators boost customer sales. The ability to kind of suggest relevant products based on the customer's purchase history or preference, or maybe shop similar brands of a product that they've bought before, or even maybe browsing behavior across the internet is going to be important. I think with e-commerce, adoption on the rise, customers are expecting fast, frictionless, ordering systems, whether it's, curbside pickup, delivery, if you're in a state that allows delivery. I think retailers need a digital checkout process that's really going to flow smoothly across all of in-store operations as well, too. I think that's really important. And then kind of finally for me, I think, one of the biggest roadblocks on e-commerce is kind of compliance, right? I mean, every single state, and we work with a lot of operators that have footprints in multiple states, but everyone's got their own rules and regs around online menus, transactions, delivery, really making it critical, I think, for operators to have a platform that kind of keeps everybody kind of compliant, right? Out of curiosity, Ben, how can retailers manage their B2B e-com strategy, and kind of what technology enables what technology exists to power that decision making?
Yeah, the key is really using your data-driven insights that you get from your point of sale or loyalty software to understand your customers' preferences and value props, to build out like that right size assortment. And there's three key areas there, right? Like the first is understanding what your customers buy and what their demographics are. 1% of customers at a dispensary make up more than 20% of total sales. People who use the product every day, so it's about 15% of total foot traffic, account for 90% of sales. So knowing what your heavy consumers are buying is essential to making sure that you're stocking the right products. The second key is product performance. You want to buy products from wholesalers with the highest margin velocity. So which products are contributing the most to your P&L, and which products, when added to other baskets, either through promos and certain discounts or naturally, organically at the point of sale, to increase total basket size, enhance the profitability of those units. And the last key here on ecom is, especially now that we're about a month from 420, is really knowing what products you need during those seasonal periods. So like, for instance, during the 420 period on LeafLink's platform, the average retailer is purchasing more than 40% additional units of flower than they would at any other part of the year. Like 420 is still a flower holiday. So as a retailer, you need to make sure that you have enough flower on your shelves, because it would be akin to like Black Friday at Best Buy. You're looking to buy a TV on discount and it's not there. So you're going to go to a different store to get that. And it's the same thing in cannabis, right? Like as a retailer, you ultimately need to understand, what are your customers looking to buy? Which products make the biggest difference to your P&L? And how do you best optimize those products to target your customers in a time when it's seasonally appropriate?
Yeah, I totally agree. Having the right products on the right shelves at the right time is, it's clutch, especially when we're looking at that 420 holiday, right? And e-commerce strategy really isn't just about having a website anymore. Like, this is about having a fully connected ecosystem that's going to make that shopping a lot easier for customers, while keeping your operations running smoothly and kind of being intelligent with those purchases that you're making on those products. I think that's going to put you in a good position to win on holidays like 420 for sure. Cool. All right. Let's talk about some in-store technologies. I get excited about tech. I kind of geek out over a lot of the tech stuff. I think, that the modern dispensary is really evolving. It's becoming really like a retail space. And I get a chance to, we're setting up new store activations to see a lot of the creative ways that operators are kind of setting this up. And there's a lot of unique ways that you could really increase sales and drive efficiencies through some of this technology that's being rolled out. One of them is working with smart screens and displays, right? The days of kind of relying on some of those static menus and those handwritten notes, I think, are over, right? I think the modern dispensaries are really starting to leverage some of that automation, those innovative interactive screens, the digital menus that allow you to create more of that dynamic shopping experience. And these smart dispensaries are really leveraging that technology that's going to allow those customers to explore their products at their own pace, right? right? And that's going to allow them to have real-time product details and even more live inventory updates, which is going to obviously improve the overall flow. And as we're kind of like talking about like that customer experience, I think the customers are now starting to become more comfortable with those self-service like kiosks that you see across traditional retail industry. And you see it all the time, especially in restaurants right now. Those kiosks, the touchless ordering systems, the checkout options, that's going to reduce a lot of those wait times. It's going to allow bud tenders to kind of focus on some of those high value interactions a little bit more and create a much more seamless shopping experience. And then I know from my personal experience, right, nothing frustrates me a little bit more than kind of like picking out a product, going to a dispensary after I pre-order it, and then kind of getting it in there and then saying, oh, sorry, we sold out of it, right? That soft allocation is going to be very, very important for operators within the technology they're using. But Ben, in your eyes, how are retailers using technology to improve their wholesale workflow?
Yeah, look, the key from tech automations at the retail level, especially when it comes to purchasing from wholesale partners, is how do you manage your purchasing process to adequately meet the demands of your consumers? How do you reduce the operational burdens on your intake and fulfillment teams? And ultimately, how do you improve the sell-through capacity at the point of sale so that the brands that are entrusting you as a partner to put products on shelves and represent them to the customers are really meeting that need. And on consumer purchasing, right? Like Sweed does an amazing job through the loyalty and other like in-store technology of putting key inventory that's actually in stock on menus and promotions to meet the consumer needs for those products. One of the keys on the B2B side is really managing your payments infrastructure. Today, most digital payments in dispensaries is non-compliant. Like the only compliant payment method is ACH. And the way that most operators have been able to sufficiently use a B2C ACH function has been through loyalty software. If you give a customer a promotion to purchase through your app and pay through ACH, they're very likely to do it. It's actually compliant. They're much higher rates for the dispensary, like they're making more on each transaction. Overall, it's much better to use proper technology that is compliant in managing that purchasing decision. On the intake and fulfillment side, really it's about automating compliance. One of my favorite features about LeafLink and the Leaf Trade platforms is that at intake at the retailer will automate all of those manifest changes and transfers through Metric, so you don't have to do it yourself. Most operators today, if they're not using our platform, basically have a team of people sitting in a room manually moving those tags over. It is very burdensome and complex. It's much easier when you have a system that automates that flow entirely. And the last key is really making sure you have enough sell-through capacity and representing your products in a way that the consumers can go and purchase it. Through LeafLink, we equip all of our retailers and brands with sell-through information on the SKUs that they sell into a store. So based on the brand assortment, hey, this product on this shelf is selling through at a much higher rate than another one. Maybe I'm going to stock that SKU versus the alternative. And it makes for a much better relationship between the retailer and brand when you're giving them the SKUs that the retailer needs to really get into the consumer's hands.
Yeah, all great points. I can certainly speak to also just the redundancy of having to have multiple people doing multiple tasks at multiple different stores, right? Having a unique ecosystem that allows everybody to kind of flow through, kind of reduce any of that overhead. It's going to really simplify that process. And I think that just kind of speaks to like a well-designed dispensary is more than really just a store, right? It's a tech-powered ecosystem that's really going to connect your people, your products, your data, and really create more of that seamless experience for both the customers and the operators. Cool. All right, let's talk AI and data analytics. I'm going to probably leave some of this data stuff for you, Ben, but I do get excited about some of the AI. We're using AI, for a lot of different reasons here at Sweed, whether it's personalizing that customer experience or the loyalty or optimizing some of the inventory, forecasting demands, retailers that are really starting to leverage AI are kind of setting themselves up for like long-term success, right? AI is here. It's not going anywhere. It's just going to become more ingrained into our system moving forward. One of the biggest challenges in cannabis retail is kind of just maintaining that right balance of stock, which we kind of talked about a little bit, having enough of what sells with without overstocking slow moving products. AI could really analyze that sales velocity, the seasonality we talked about around 420, purchasing patterns to automate some of those reordering and stock levels. AI doesn't really just help with sales today, but it could also kind of predict what comes next, right? And I think a lot of operators are keen on having that data available now. It's almost becoming that standard. So by analyzing some of that, the historical data and some of those market trends, retailers can really start to anticipate, demand, plan for those seasonal shifts, and be much more informed. So how are retailers using data to manage their purchasing and inventory decisions, Ben?
Look, I think AI is an amazing opportunity for retailers to improve many of their workflows across all the different parts of their business. But in order to leverage a data tool, you have to make sure that your data is actually right. And one of the biggest challenges in the industry today is that disparate data and business systems are really hurting operators. Like the average dispensary has five, six, seven different solutions in their tech stack today, right? Like you have one platform for your B2C e-com, you have a point of sale system, you have a technology for marketing or loyalty, you have an ERP that's either cannabis focused or financial focused or both, you have an analytics and inventory management system, you have a seed to sale system, and you have your financial services flows. All of those different solutions have very limited integrations in the industry today, low effectiveness at passing data through those solutions, and ultimately it ends up impacting the retailer pretty significantly, right? Like they don't have limited availability of integrated data across SKUs, stores, states, product or customer flows. Unstructured data causes reconciliation issues between the seed to sale systems and the point solutions in the tech stack. And it's like one of the things I compliment Sweed a lot on is being able to put together many of these different technologies at the retail level into one solution that doesn't require extensive integrations across many different forms of data types. LeafLink is doing the exact same process on the wholesale side. We are integrating many of the key point systems that operators use today in order to make it so that data actually flows across systems in a way that's right and reconciles exactly with metric. Ultimately, if the future relies on pure good data to inform your decisions and analytical tactics. You have to have the right data, and the only way to do it today in cannabis is like a comprehensive all-in-one solution because the integrations on point systems just don't work. At LeafLink, we understand that problem really well, and we work very hard to put together all the different data flows that exist on you as an operator into one sufficient platform view. And we do it through our market data insights product. It's free for all retailers to use it. You log in for a platform will instantly tell you, hey, in this zip code, these are the exact products that are selling either through your retail counterparts or through your brand partners. These are the products that we think make sense for you to stock. But at the same time, it's also this is how many of that product we think you should stock based on the data that we have. Like LeafLink sits at a really great place where we hold both wholesale purchasing flows and the sell through at retail. There's no other platform in the industry that does that. And because of some of the challenges with trying to track metric transfers across different tag stages, it's really difficult to make any informed decision on your wholesale purchasing without the flows that we have from both the wholesale platforms and retail. It's one of the reasons I love our partnership with Sweed, where we're working to integrate many of those different data flows across the LeafLink and LeafTrade platforms. If you know as a retailer the wholesale purchasing decisions and wholesale ordering flows, and you know what's happening at your retail point of sale, you can make really good decisions on what products to purchase and what SKUs are selling well or not based on those flows. And today, there's no real way to do that outside of these tied integrations that are really tight, but at the same time, don't have to integrate across 40 systems in 41 different states.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, the key there is really just having that right technology to turn that data into actionable insights. We've kind of failed at that in the past, we being the cannabis industry. And first of all, I also want to commend you guys on providing some of that education to your customers as well, too. I don't know where you sit on this, but I think education is one of the biggest gaps in this industry, both for consumers as well as operators and retailers and everybody else that's working in this space. I think we can do a much better job as a larger organization on being able to to provide educational resources across the board as whether it's on purchasing product or leveraging technology. And then again, how to use that right technology and turn that into actionable insights. Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, cannabis has 41 state markets. Each one of those markets has an entirely different structure with different regulation requirements. It's one of the most heavy compliance requirement industries in the world. And you have to do so in an industry that has very high taxation, with limited opportunities to sell through retail. Like in cannabis today, you have about 12,000 stores nationally. In a market like alcohol, you have 2.3 million locations. So to play with the elasticities and price points and supply that you need is really hard over a smaller store base. So cannabis is very difficult, and being able to equip operators with the necessary information to make those decisions, I think, is so important. And I know Sweet does an amazing job of that as well.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah. All right, great. Let's kind of shift more into like some of the, consumer centric trends that we're seeing, right? I've been in this space for a very long time now. I think, the modern cannabis consumer is much more informed than when we started this thing out several years ago, right? They're selective. They're more engaged than ever before. I think they're also starting to expect transparency. We just talked about education. Education is really important, right? And I think we're starting to see some of them that are, not just using it for just recreational purposes, but educating themselves on how they can use it specifically for medicinal value as well, too. And those personal experience that they go through that shopping experience go just beyond buying a product, right? I think there's a demand today for transparency. Customers want to see what exactly that they're buying. Where was it grown? What does the testing look like? What was the processing? What's inside? And, transparency really isn't just kind of a nice to have anymore. It's more of a key factor when you're building out that trust. And then the retailers and the brands that are providing that clear information, on sourcing, potency, testing results, I think they're going to win time and time again, for customers that are really looking for informative purchases, safe, high quality products. I know that we build this out within our e-com ecosystem. There's a bunch of different ways that you can shop specifically for your products. It doesn't have to be just on THC levels or just edibles or, category types or anything like that. But I think education really is the key component in this. And that's the one thread that kind of, brings us all the way through this with so many new products, that are just hitting the markets. And you can kind of speak to this probably a little bit. I think consumers are feeling overwhelmed. I've been in this space for a very long time. I still feel overwhelmed at time, right? And I think the dispensaries that are prioritizing the education, whether it's through bud tender training, those digital menus, or maybe some of those in-store experience, are really going to kind of create that stronger relationship with the customer. And I think everybody knows, like, if you have a knowledgeable customer, you have a loyal customer, right? They're going to keep coming back to where they can get those answers. So when people want to understand, what they're buying, they're feeling much more confident in their purchases. And I think that's just going to lead to higher satisfaction and more repeat business. And I think the other layer that kind of gets put on top of that is having that personalized loyalty flow and that referral programs. I think that's really important too, right? The days of that generic one size fit all discounts, I think, really aren't going to cut it anymore, especially in some of those markets where you're seeing that price compression as well too. You really have to start connecting with some of these customers. They want reward programs that are going to be tailored specifically for their preferences, whether that's or exclusive access to a product or maybe, some personalized details or referral bonuses for signing up friends. So I'm curious to see, like, how are you seeing brands and retailers, use data to prioritize the loyalty and the referral programs in meaningful ways?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've talked a lot about how everything at this industry happens at the state level. And one of the keys is really understanding what's happening in these state by state dynamics to inform your decision making when it comes to both the products you're selling to your customers and like how you're really optimizing for the technologies in retail. And there's three key areas I think about here. The first is price. Pricing is very different on a market by market basis, as we know. In states like New York, where LeafLink's headquartered, the average eighth is selling for about $40. Customers are very readily able to purchase at that price point. In Michigan, the average eighth is selling for about $10, with many eighths selling for even less. You're not going to be able to sell a $40 eighth in that market. So being able to right size your pricing to your customers is very important. Another key idea is category market share. the categories that consumers look to purchase vary a lot based on their state markets. For instance, like in more mature markets, purchasers are looking for value products with high THC percentages, high quality flower at very low prices. Like that is very important to those mature markets like Oregon, California, and others. In your earlier stage markets, more premium products with much higher price points and like higher, more premium attributes are typically looked at more favorably. Adult use markets, concentrates and pre-rolls sell significantly better than they do in medical markets. Bombs and tinctures sell really well in medical markets. They don't sell particularly well in adult use markets. The last area is SKU counts. The amount of SKUs that you would hold as a store varies a lot on a market by market basis. One instance could be like Washington, which has the most SKUs per store of any state. The average store carries over 3,000 SKUs, and it's because consumer purchasing is just so varied across those different brands. On the shorter end, you can use a state like Florida. It's 100% vertical, so you're only stocking the brands that exist at your processing center. And the average store in Florida has about 300 SKUs. So being able to stock like the right number of SKUs matters a lot. It's much easier to manage 300 SKUs than it is 3,000. But if you were to have a store in Washington with only 300 SKUs, like you're going to be missing most of the brands that people are looking to purchase and suffer a lot from stock out problems. So ultimately, the key is like understanding what your customers are looking for in these markets and making sure that you have the adequate offerings to give them what they need.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't imagine wrapping my head around having 3,000 SKUs at a dispensary. It seems like just complete overkill. So I think being able to kind of identify and narrow in on what your customers are really kind of just driving your business and putting them in a good position to figure out what, how to basically, stock your stores in an efficient way. I think the retailers that are going to kind of prioritize those, customer-centric trends are really going to be the ones that thrive for sure. Interesting info, man. That's crazy. 3,000 SKUs. All right, cool. Let's talk about some of like what we're thinking about here in the next 5 to 10 years and what we're going to see, right? That kind of brings us to like looking forward here in the future. Get your crystal ball out, Ben. I think, we've talked about this many times already. This industry is really evolving fast. I think the next decade is really going to be defined by smarter, more connected, and more efficient operators. I think retailers are going to start to embrace some of this new technology, the automation, and they're going to probably continue to kind of lean on some of the other ones that are like leading the way and creating that path. At Sweed, I think we believe that dispensaries are kind of starting to move away from that fragmented system and moving more towards that fully integrated solution that's going to kind of connect your inventory, your sales, your products, your customer engagement. The way I see it, I think the days of multiple disconnected platforms are numbered, and you're starting to see that even with our competitors. They're kind of replicating some of our workflow where they're trying to get rid of that fractured tech stack and bring it all in house. I think AI, I kind of talked about this as well too. I think AI is just going to become that much more critical. It's really not just about, just product recommendations. It's going to go a hell of a lot more deeper into that, both with compliance and logistics. And then, like you said, getting the right products on the right shelves. I think we're already starting to see some of that automation in some of these areas, like especially within our reporting, age verification, even predictive, compliance monitoring. And then on the logistics side, I think AI is really going to help with inventory distribution by reducing some of that waste that we kind of touched on as well too, and really ensure dispensaries have those right products on the shelves in the right way. I'm kind of curious where you see kind of some of the future, of cannabis developing here, Ben.
Yeah, we love to think about what's going to happen over the next decade. And I think it's very important to take learnings from the past, especially as it relates to the legalization of an industry that was previously prohibited. And you have a really good parallel between the rollout of legalization of cannabis in the US and the re-legalization of alcohol after prohibition with the 21st Amendment in 1933. And look, in alcohol, it took over 40 years for the legal markets we know today to be built. And many of the unintended consequences of prohibition, once alcohol is re-legalized, took time to solve, and they look very similar to the problems today, right? Like you had major gray market producers. Most scholars accept that moonshine was more popular than legal production until the 1950s, more than 20 years post legalization. There was heavy involvement in organized crime. Like many of the early mobsters in New York and Chicago rose through bootlegging and selling alcohol illegally. And the relegalization of alcohol took a state by state approach, much like cannabis has. Like Mississippi didn't even legalize alcohol until 1966, over 3 years after the end of Prohibition. So a lot of the challenges for the industry have been hard to dispel, and the story's the same in cannabis. It just takes time for the market to build the necessary precursors to a more mature industry. Alcohol was able to get more than half of the population consuming the product on a regular basis. And there's two key changes that the alcohol industry is able to grow so well into. The first is retail accessibility. Alcohol sold in 2.3 million locations. Cannabis is in about 12,000. The enforcement of the illicit market. You had the creation of the ATF. It was part of the Department of Treasury, and it was built really to go after much of the profiteering of mobsters that were selling cannabis illegally. And through the combination of more retail accessibility and clamping down on the illicit market, you created a lot of significant new demand from those legacy consumers. So those changes are coming for cannabis, right? Like you had the rollout of new markets and retail licenses, expanding accessibility. Enforcement action has ramped up very significantly, especially in oversupplied markets like California, Michigan, and Oklahoma. You've had very strong new legal adoption that's not stopping anytime soon. Most scholars estimate that legal consumers in the next 5 years for cannabis is going to increase by 18 million. Alcohol is going to lose about 2 million total consumers. And the policy liberalization that's to come, whether it's next year or 5 years or 10 years down the line, like eventually cannabis is going to be sold nationally through interstate markets with descheduling dynamics there. So look, over time, the opportunity in cannabis is very similar to alcohol. You're going to have a regulated CPG industry where you have upstream commoditization and consolidation that has started. It's going to continue and continue for a long time. Brand power is going to expand with improvements to pricing elasticity. Once you can sell over many locations, you'll have a large enough unit base for the industry that prices can keep going down and it makes sense for the cost structure. Retail margins are going to continue to prove over time. Like once you get rid of many of these inventory management challenges and requirements for discounting, like margins look very different. If inventory management and cannabis look more similar to a C store or grocery store, thousands and thousands of stores would be profitable today. Unfortunately, that number is probably in the hundreds on a base of 12,000. And lastly, like legal market participation is going to grow. Most consumers today consume illicitly. Like the legal market's about $32 billion in size. The illicit market is 60 to 70 billion. Over time, those are going to continue to flip where more and more consumers in the illicit market start to consume legally. And that really has to do with higher retail accessibility. If you have a dispensary near where you live, you're much, much more likely to purchase. And over time, prices are going to go down. So
Yeah.
really, like this industry is going to continue to develop very well. And we have analogs from the past that tell us this is exactly what it's going to look like.
Yeah, you kind of hit on that with that pricing as well too. I think that black markets really kind of still be relevant for a long time until kind of that pricing kind of just regulates itself across the country. Wow, that was a lot to you shared this last year. It looks like there's a lot of excitement that you have around like the next 5 to 10 years. I know I'm excited for it. You know, I'm optimistic on what's to come. But again, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing some insights today. We certainly covered a lot of ground around emerging technologies, some of the customer trends, and kind of what that future of cannabis really looks like. Let's turn it over to some questions. Do we have any questions that were populated during the last hour?
Yeah, we actually have comment in the chat. So, oh, thank you, Matt. You just said killer webinar.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. But let me go to the Q&A, and we do have a question. Okay, so what are some techniques slash software that businesses can leverage to stay in the middle, never over or understocked?
Yeah, assuming that's on inventory management, I think there's a few key areas like on LeafLink's platform specifically, we have an inventory insights module where retailers can look at what products they have stocked and understand like how those assortment decisions are impacting their sell through and ultimately their margin velocity. So I think LeafLink's a great platform for that. Through Sweed, you get many of your insights into your customer purchasing and understanding what your customers are looking for you to buy. That's going to improve your assortment decision making. There are many inventory management specific tools in the industry that attempt to do similar techniques where based on your sell through as a store and your point of sale information, they'll tell you the assortment to use. I think Generally, they work at retail. It's just very difficult when you don't have that connected wholesale purchasing decision. So I think LeafLink and Sweed are two very good places to go for that inventory management help. And as part of like our all-in-one comprehensive solutions, we offer a lot when it comes to inventory. I'm sure MJ can talk more about how Sweed does it.
Yeah, just a little bit, right? There's different little levers that we can push within the software itself as well, too, right? From low quantity thresholds or, expiration dates and reports that you can tie around that. You can then build out specific, discounts and campaigns specifically around those products as well, too. But all of that's really built into a robust reporting system that we have here with that suite.
All right, awesome. Thank you both. We have actually quite a lot of questions coming in. So, next one, what are your thoughts on hemp and hemp beverages?
Ooh, I'll let you take this one, Ben. I don't know if I really have a preference on this. I did just get some experience. I was up in Minnesota at Lucky Leaf about 2 weeks ago. By the way, I'm very, very high. I'm very excited about what's going on in Minnesota. That's a great market. And those THC, hemp-derived drinks, they were fantastic. I'm not going to lie. That was kind of my first experience with it. I'm curious to get your take.
Yeah, look, on hemp THC, let's start with the most important key, and it's the regulatory decision making. No one knows what's going to happen with the Farm Bill. Most operators in the industry today are telling you that they don't believe the loophole is going to be closed. Almost all of the MSOs have launched some form of a hemp derived beverage or other hemp derived products into the market. And the key there, as we talked a lot about, is retail accessibility. You can sell regulated product in about 12,000 locations. You can sell hemp derived beverages across 37 states in basically anywhere. So you have large, big like retailers like Total Wine and Spirits that are stocking tons and tons of these hemp THC beverages. They're now devoting entire sections of their stores to hemp THC beverages. You have companies like Rebel Rabbit inking deals with AB InBev distributors. Like Rebel Rabbit is now going to distribute through their AB InBev distribution networks to over 30 different states. Like that's a lot. Liquor stores are starting to stock the product. In some markets like New Jersey and Connecticut, it's actually legal for regulated product to be sold into liquor stores. Like in New Jersey, you have 7,000 liquor stores versus about 250 dispensaries. So like the growth and accessibility that you get from the hemp derived market is very strong. So if you believe that the loophole is not going to be closed, no one knows today. It probably makes sense to go into that market. You can just access a much larger consumer base. At the same time, like the Farm Bill loophole does have a lot of discussion about being closed. And in many of our conversations with regulators on the Hill, like it's an interest to close the loophole. It's just not the highest priority. So we'll see what happens with the current Trump administration. There just hasn't been much discussion of it at all. But if that Farm Bill loophole stays open, more and more companies are going to leverage more of the resources specifically to target the hemp derived market. It's just easier to sell into with less compliance requirements and ultimately a much larger consumer base.
Awesome. All right. Moving on to our next question. Okay, so you mentioned education being crucial, but what avenues do you think will be most valuable for delivering current info?
Hmm. Current info in terms I guess we get a little clarity there, right? In terms of kind of current info on what there's a lot that education will cover, right? I know one of the things that we're really excited about here at Sweed is there's a partnership that we're kind of forming with C Talent, right? So C Talent is a national platform that lives in almost every single dispensary across the country, and they provide free training and for vendor management responsibility, bud tender training, and we're going to be rolling out some training platforms that are going to allow folks to really understand how to sell Sweed or how to position or use Sweed, excuse me. And so we're starting to see a lot of these third parties that are kind of coming into the mix where they're providing some of these LMS platforms as well too, both for retailers, both for software companies in terms of like learning the systems if you're an operator and getting like onboarded into the platform. But from the customer standpoint, I think one of the biggest gaps that I was kind of probably talking about was the knowledge between customers and bud tender is not there today, right? What the brand is actually designed to do, what it's being sold, what it's there for, that's not transitioning directly over to the customer right now. So, platforms like C Talent, I think, are going to be kind of the future of this. So It's going to create a much more well-informed bud tender that's going to make the customer feel that much more comfortable and enthusiastic and confident when they're going in, and they could kind of talk maybe about specific ailments or not being able to sleep at night, and really kind of sit down and actually search and have educated discussions on what products might work best for them as well too. But I'm curious to get your insights.
Yeah, actually, no, you make an amazing point about education at retail. Cannabis is very different than most other industries where you have distinct brands and retailers, and that most CPG industries, the brand is the one responsible for that consumer education and marketing that brand to the consumer. What makes cannabis very different is the brand doesn't actually have any direct relationship with the end consumer. It's all held at retail. So in traditional CPG industries, the brand knows who their end consumers are that are purchasing the product through products like Nielsen data at retail. That doesn't exist in cannabis. So as a brand, you don't really know who your consumers are. The retailer does. So as a brand, your job is to inform the retailer on your product attributes for the retail and really the bud tender to help inform consumers on your product propositions. Once like more traditional and mainstream B2C marketing channels open up to brands, they'll be much better able to fulfill that like traditional brand promise of informing the consumer. But today that's broken. It doesn't exist. So as a retailer, it is your job ultimately to help the consumer know which brands best meet the value propositions and qualities that they're looking for out of a product. And there isn't really a good way to do it. A product like C Talent is like definitely a market leader in that.
Yeah, and then with our technology, we're going to import, a lot of different types of tools that will be allowed to kind of create some more of that consumer education as well too. But we're also a little limited in terms of what's coming over through track and trace systems, what the manufacturers and the testing labs are actually putting into that product as well too. We're ready for it. The more data and detail that you can give us on those products, we'll incorporate that, and we'll have that living across the e-commerce side where customers can really kind of take a deep dive into the product descriptions, what kind of effects you can feel, what kind of moods, even the scents and the smells and the odors that you would see when you're consuming these products as well too.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Yeah.
All right. We got a few more minutes left. I'm going to try and get through more of these questions as much as we can. What are the types of cost range people can expect to spend on a proper POS layout? Can clients just use Square and save?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really going to depend on where you're going, right? So, with Sweed, we kind of provide everything all in on one place, right? Your point of sale, your e-commerce, your marketing engine, the ability to send SMS, email, text messages as well too. Your loyalty lives here, delivery lives here, and depending on your business will kind of depend on what software that you should kind of go with, right? But ours is basically all inclusive, not relying on any sort of third-party integrations or any sort of plugins. If you're going with some of our competitors, now that you're going to start to piece together some of those ecosystems, right? You're going to piece together, if you're doing delivery, you'll need to, use a third-party integration that's going to be able to execute delivery. And then you'll probably need to plug into somebody else's e-commerce. And all of those prices are going to vary wildly. Also, specific markets are going to determine how much cost is, right? New York is an incredibly competitive market right now. When new markets come online, we start to see a lot of our competitors really trying to give away that software for free or making accommodations to purchasing hardware on their behalf just to get them to sign on a dotted line, right? So it's really, really going to vary. I'd say, for us and totally being transparent, we're going to probably live anywhere between like that $1,500 to $2,000 a month for all in, and that gets you everything, right? When you're working with some of our competitors, and I don't want to turn this into an us versus them kind of conversation, that's not what we're here to do. But by the end, by when you're done kind of piecing together all of that tech system, right? You're paying $1,000 for your POS, 500 for e-com, 500 for loyalty, 500 for delivery. If it's a cheap delivery, it's usually another 1,000 or more. You're going to end up paying anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 for your full tech stack. So I think it really kind of depends on the market. It depends on what you are doing in terms of your operation and how you guys are actually rolling out your operation. And then it kind of just depends on what kind of partner you guys want to work with, right? One of the things that I kind of hang my hat on is we're not here just to kind of get you guys live and, open your store and say good luck and we're kind of out of here, right? We actually put a team with you that's going to work with you guys post going live with us to ensure that your discounts are running right. We're going to look at your reportings. How are we driving customers? We're going to do A/B testing with a lot of your marketing campaigns as well too. I know that was more of a Swede kind of question. Ben, if you want to weigh in, feel free though.
No, MJ, you're the POS expert.
Excellent. You
We're
got
with
it.
you.
Cool, cool.
Awesome, guys. Just a few more questions here. Ben, I feel like you might be able to help answer this one. Which states have the highest adoption of digital first shopping behavior, like placing pre-orders versus shopping entirely in store?
That's the question. It all ties to the maturity cycle. Your newer markets that are more recently coming online are much more digitally focused than some of your more legacy markets, and a lot of that has to do with the technology powering those stores. In states like California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Oklahoma, like many of the purchasing behaviors are a lot more legacy and exist in the ways they did in 2017 to 2020, where there's not much digital penetration. You had some purchasing on platforms like Weed Maps and Leafly, but it wasn't that large of an allocation to the stores. And ultimately, it really relied on the consumer going into your store, seeing what inventory you had, and purchasing those products. Today, the newer markets look a lot different, and a lot of it has to do with technology solutions like Sweed that empower the retailer to use their both loyalty and promotional strategies to directly empower the consumer to make purchasing decisions from home through a combination of new B2C e-com that's tied to the point of sale, through opportunities, through loyalty systems to specifically purchase products that had promos and discounts. Those are a lot more prevalent in your newer markets. So for a state like Maryland, the amount of purchasing that happens online through digital channels is a lot higher than it is in a state like Oregon. And as more newer markets come online with stores that are bringing on newer technology solutions, that's only going to continue to increase. So, like for instance, we talked at the beginning of the call about the states contributing the most to total store growth: New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Illinois, Minnesota, and Maryland. Like they are going to be a lot more digitally focused than many of your more mature markets, and understanding your digital strategy is key in those states.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So I know we are at time, but we've got a couple more questions. You guys want to try and do one more here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
I'm
do
gonna
one
do one
more.
more.
All right. Jennifer, I saw your question come in the chat and in Q&A, so I'm going to answer that one. What are your top 3 compliance pain points?
Ooh. Ben, you want to take first stab?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. Number one is the tag transfer process. It is very cumbersome for both brands upstream, especially, but also at the retail level to move products across transfers. The second key area that impacts for retailers is on your intake. Being able to like take all of your inventory and have to make sure that it reconciles with the metric flows is very important. It takes a really long time for your in-store staff to do that. And I think the third key compliance area is around taxation. It's difficult for many operators to know where to bucket costs to remove a lot of the 280 burden. Most do it like all their costs into their cost of goods sold. It's not necessarily right for many operators. So it's difficult to maintain the balance of like compliantly reporting your P&L and doing so in a way to shield a lot of those taxation requirements that come from big compliance needs.
Yeah, I'm going to echo basically everything Ben just said, right? Especially around the taxes. You really have to understand how taxes work, and you also have to select a technology partner that understands how taxes work and set everything up right within the system. It could be a killer, right? And then also the ability to kind of talk with Metric, BioTrack, having those smooth integrations between both of those is going to be really, really important when we're looking at anything compliance related.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. Again, you'll get the recording of this webinar. We appreciate you joining us. All right, everyone have a great day.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll see you guys.